Hello, this is the world's longest guided busway at around 16 miles in length, running between Huntingdon and Cambridge in Cambridgeshire. It cost a mere £116 million, meaning it actually cost £181 million by the time it was finished. But was all of that effort and cost really worth it? Who knows, but today we're going to find out by way of a race between the world record-holding Cambridgeshire busway and the car. My name is John, welcome to Auto Shenanigans. Why not consider subscribing? We begin with a car park in Huntingdon, which for the purpose of this video will be standing in as my house, or the starting point for our race, which begins with immediate effect. Indeed, and from my pretend house it's about 18 miles or so to our destination, which is a lovely area of greenery in the middle of Cambridge. It seems to me like the journey should be fairly straightforward, but you never know. Cambridgeshire Council aren't exactly known for their love of cars, so we might find a few obstacles along the way. Or cyclists, same thing. But that's a problem for later, because the first road we're using is the A1307, and this stretch is particularly interesting for road nerds because it used to be the A604 before it was upgraded to a dual carriageway where it became the A14, which was then replaced by a new A14, at which point it became the A1307, which today is a very quiet stretch of dual carriageway that, if anything, is a little out of place. Although, as the locals will know, it's very useful for when the A14 shits itself because of an accident or whatever, and actually in some cases this road can sometimes be quicker than the larger road that replaced it. It's only been about 10 minutes and I'm just coming up to the Bar Hill junction where I shall pick up the new A14, but if you're passing this way, keep an eye out for the long-abandoned Lulworth aka Bar Hill services. There was once a Little Chef located there, and actually across the short distance that we've covered from the start line was a surprising amount of Little Chef locations. Manchester Little Chef was demolished when the A604 was upgraded to a dual carriageway. Hemmingford Abbots is now a car repair shop. Fen Stanton was destroyed in a fire, but the old Swavesey Little Chef still lives on as Herbie's Diner, leaving Bar Hill, which sits abandoned. But moving on, and we're heading on to the M11, but only for about 3 miles before turning off at junction 12. Which is known as the Haggis Farm Interchange, and it's got a bit of an odd layout where the slip road that I'll be using just sort of merges with a local road, but whatever. The real question is, why is it called the Haggis Farm Interchange? Well, that's because, perhaps predictably, next door there's a farm called Haggis. Why is the farm called that? Absolutely no idea. We are now entering Cambridge, and the plan is to make my way to the Queen Anne Terrace car park, which sounds exciting, doesn't it? Although the Google reviews might suggest otherwise. In any case, we'll head there, dump the car, and then it'll be a short walk to the finish line. I don't know where to park. I need to find somewhere that is not too far away from where I need to walk. No point parking on the other side of the car park. No right turn, that's a shame, because it looks like there's a space down there. Never mind, what's that? This is a narrow space. Can I fit in here? I reckon I can. Yes. Yes. I am aware it's a narrow space. I'm not getting out of that, but that'll do. Right, I need to mess around with some cameras and get myself sorted and get on the way. I will see you in a moment. The Queen Anne Terrace car park was first thought up in the late 1950s, which perhaps explains its less than ideal aesthetic, but in any case this was at a time when Cambridge Council were a little bit more open to the idea of the car, and in fact it was one of 9 large car parks planned for Cambridge. There were also talks of building an underground car park below my very feet. This is Parker's Piece, a 25-acre area of open land that was created in 1613 and named after Edward Parker, who was a farmer for Cambridgeshire's centuries-old Trinity College. Anyway, someone didn't really care for any of that, and over the decades, several plans have been put forward to build a car park underneath it, which perhaps fortunately hasn't happened. Not yet, anyway. In the middle of Parker's Piece is a lamppost that was installed in 1893 at the request of residents who, at the time, had no idea it would become the finish line for a race between a car and a guided bus. But here we are. That journey in the car took me 44 minutes and 1 second, so now let's repeat the entire thing, but this time using a guided busway. Welcome back to my house, or the start point. Just over there is Huntingdon bus station, so what do you say we make our way over there and do us a little bit of busing? I meant to film getting on the bus and all of that, but I had to run in order to catch it. Sort of forgot about the filming. Here we go then, £180 million worth of guided busway. We'll get on to why we're not actually on a guided busway in a moment, because first, what even is a guided busway? Constructed from concrete, guided busways are much like a road, but they feature curbs along its length where guide wheels mounted to the side of the bus will keep it heading in the right direction. And the theory is that buses can travel much faster, in this case up to 55 miles per hour, and it also requires no steering input from the driver, so they can just sit there and doom scroll on TikTok. As I said at the start, Cambridgeshire is home to the world's largest guided busway, but if you look down there, you'll notice that we're driving along a normal road and not a guided busway, and that's because it's only the world's longest busway when you add up the various smaller sections, and in fact we won't even be travelling along the entire length of the busway today because it makes no sense. Instead, our journey looks a bit like this. We start as we did at the bus station, drive around some roads for a bit and then pick up the actual guided busway at St Ives. After a while, we then come off the guided busway somewhere in Cambridge and then rejoin the normal roads to get to our destination. So really, the guided busway only accounts for a certain percentage of our journey, but I have at least selected a route that encompasses the largest section. We wouldn't want to miss out after all. Been on the bus for about 25 minutes now. Haven't quite made it to the guided busway part yet, but I'm sure we'll get there eventually. I'll surely be arriving at St Ives Park and Ride, where the bus transitions from the normal road and onto the guided busway. Now, a vehicle that carries multiple people along a predetermined path might also be described as a train, and yeah, it does make you wonder why the council decided to build a busway, more so when you consider that the busway is built on what used to be a railway. Actually, we need not wonder at all. The answer is obvious. It's cheap. In fact, a guided busway is probably the cheapest solution a council can apply to mass transportation, whilst simultaneously looking like they give a shit and are doing something amazing. But ultimately, we've got the world's largest guided busway because we weren't prepared to pay for anything else. I'm just passing through what's called the Fen Drayton Lakes, which in the old days used to be open fenland, but then between the 1950s and the 1990s, it was all dug up as part of a gravel quarry, and indeed it's that quarrying activity that led to the lake's creation, because when they'd finished with it, the land that they'd excavated was flooded, and now it's a nature reserve. Apparently, because of fens and old quarries, the busway is sinking and starting to crack, but I'm sure the council are on top of the safety side of things.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
A short distance up from the lakes and we reach the first of many level crossings, if that's the term. It's where the busway has to cross over a normal road, and these are traffic light controlled junctions that automatically detect a bus and change the lights accordingly to keep the bus's journey as seamless as possible. However, we do appear to be moving rather slowly and not quite at the 55 miles per hour we were promised. Yeah, the busway has a temporary 30 mile an hour speed limit and it's 20 miles an hour across all of the crossings, and that's because the council failed to do the required health and safety assessments when it came to building and operating the busway. After 5 years of questionable operation, it took the tragic death of a pedestrian for it to be realised that the council hadn't done anything to mitigate the risks against injury or death, down to the simplest of things like having some lighting at crossings. 3 years later, and someone else died because the council still hadn't bothered to do anything about it, and then again in 2019 and in 2021. £180 million and you couldn't be bothered to do the paperwork correctly. And this time has cost more than money, except for Cambridge County Council, who were fined £6 million following a guilty plea in court. It's fair to say they f***ed it up. Anyway, back to the low speed limits, which are clearly in place for safety reasons, but also they're in place whilst they install safety barriers and fences along the length of the busway, which should be completed by the end of 2026. And I would hope so, because eventually there's to be a new town built in this area known as Northstowe, and the busway runs right around the edge of the eventual town, so it's perfectly positioned for people's future transport needs. The town was first thought up in the mid-2000s with the grand plan of building 10,000 houses. So, after 20 years, how many do you think they've actually finished? Not even 2,000. Well done, guys. Interestingly, the new town is built on what used to be RAF Oakington, an airfield that opened in 1939 and got rather busy for some reason. Flying came to an end in the 1970s when the site was then taken over by the army to use as a barracks, and it would later be turned into an immigration centre, which would close in 2010 for the purpose of house building, which is still ongoing. Much like this journey, but I'm in Cambridge now and we've come off the guided busway and we're now back onto the normal roads where we'll make our way to Drummond Street bus station, where this bus will now terminate. All change, please. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Right, like earlier, I need to head to the 1893 lamppost in the middle of Parker's Piece, although this time I'm approaching it from the other direction, although it doesn't really matter, it is but a short walk. It's just over there. Okay, awesome, I am here, and I shall stop the timer and... It's such a waste of time, but... Okay, right, let's go back to the studio and we'll go through some of the numbers and the data. I'm going to try and be fair to the bus. Let's start with the costs. It was £2 for the entire journey, which, even in the best case scenario, is unlikely to cover the cost of fuel and parking when driving the car. However, there is a catch, because the bus fares are currently being subsidised, which is not to last forever, and when prices revert to normal, you're likely to pay around £6 for the same journey, at which point the car is cheaper. But for now, you can have that. However, how much do you value your time? Because the £181 million guided busway has a bit of a problem here. In the car, it took 44 minutes and 1 second, and I didn't cheat. It was early morning and I had traffic to deal with, whilst the bus journey was later in the day, ensuring less traffic. But it's fair to say it fell short of my expectations, completing the journey in 1 hour, 48 minutes and 39 seconds. If you need to be at work for 8 AM, which are you going to take? Thanks very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye.